Hey, Crystal Maiden here, and this is the best level in the game. And to be honest, I was so caught off guard by how fantastic the music was that it actually distracted me during my gameplay. Like, I felt like I wasn't playing as good because I was just so busy listening to the music. I love the techno instrumentation of it, which makes sense because it's a machinery level, even if it is just Wing Fortress again. Only, designed much better because it's not a confusing mess where you run around in circles all the time, hanging off cranes. And the fuckers they're not nearly as cheap as in Wing Fortress though. They don't shoot instantly when they show up on the screen. Like, occasionally they can be cheap, but they're not that big of a deal. And you also have these spinning fans that send you upwards. I don't remember if they were a huge thing in Wing Fortress. This is definitely a new gimmick though. You running along the background, like in Deadline. Well, it's not really new then. What is new, I guess, because I don't remember that in Deadline, is that now you can run upwards and downwards on those background things. So you can take multiple different paths. But while Sonic is smaller on the screen when he's doing that, doesn't change the fact that you can't quite see what's ahead of you. So it's really hard to stay along that path. So I don't know how they expect you to not run off them. But yeah, I really love this song. Like the electric guitar that's in it, and the melody and everything. See, how did they expect you to stay on that? I jumped instinctively because I didn't know that was suddenly going to be thrown onto that. Good thing there are bands down there. That was merciful. I really like the way the dash pads looked in the advanced games, where they were bright red and they stuck out from a distance, so you immediately wanted to hit them. That and they sent you so fast after you hit them. With most dash pads in the Sonic series, especially the ones in this game, they kind of don't look as, exciting. You also have platforms in this level that will rise up and fall, and platforms that will fall when you land on them, which isn't exactly a new concept. This is, though. You hit a power-up and then mash a button to destroy all the enemies on the screen. I guess you get rings from that, and that's what that giant number is, though. It doesn't really matter how many rings you have because you lose all of them when you get hit anyways. It only matters how much rings you have if you have Super Sonic. Of course, you can't actually start flying in that particular situation, like when you were just in tag action and then you get out of it and then you start falling. You can't immediately get back into that tag action. There's an unused to be continued scene found in the coding of the game. Originally it would have played after you beat the final boss with all of the emeralds, but they took it out. This proves that Sega had considered an episode 3, but because this game had such bad critical reception, it got cancelled. And you know what was weird? Episode 1 was the best-selling downloadable title ever. It sold 1 million copies in a short amount of time. And also was very critically successful. Fans complained it would be a rehash and not having the right controls, but it was a critical darling, just like Mania will probably be. The instant they tried to be original by having Tails as a tag action character, of course it started getting worse reviews. And so, based purely on the critics, they canceled episode 3. Yeah, see what I mean about this being cheap? How are you supposed to stay on those things when they curve around? The shapes of the continents on the planet episode 2 are shaped differently than episode 1. Was it showing you a different side of the planet? I mean, I guess it was rotating. And I'm guessing the shape of the continents in this game isn't going to be at all consistent with what Unleashed showed us. Same goes for episode 1. I doubt they care enough to keep that consistent. Which kind of defeats the purpose of the whole world building aspect of showing us the entire world with Unleashed. Just to not actually bother with that. This is another level that has a really annoying section at the very end, which happened once before in this game. Sonic 4 tends to like to do that. This has a pretty good song too. And I like how it's at dawn. Like it has this beautiful twilight sky. I just love how this game has the time of day change. Like when you go through the different acts. You've got the boring cannons from Oil Ocean Zone back. Only this time you have to jump. This time you have to homie attack in order to get in them, which is just needless padding. And those fire shooters, they're going to be a real pain in the neck. Especially since Tails can get hit by them, and then he stops carrying you and falls. That's going to be really annoying later on. The level aesthetics of this game are often based on the unused zones for Sonic 2. We got a Winter Christmas level, which was planned to be in Sonic 2, and we got a desert level as well, like the Dust Hill Zone. In Beta to Sonic 2, selecting the so-called Dust Hill Zone brings you to Mystic Cave with the Dust Hill name instead. Oil Desert is also very reminiscent of a Hope's mock-up for another unused level, Genocide City Zone. Also, another fun fact is that Episode 1's minecart only level, in the Android version, actually had no bottomless pits at all. It was almost impossible to die there. So it really wasn't that big of a deal, it was just kind of dull. In a leaked beta of the game, it actually still had the minecart only level in it, and it still had motion controls for it as well. So you had to tilt the Wiimote in order to move the minecart, and it just wasn't a very fun experience. And with Sonic Retro hacked Episode 1's level since Episode 2, they couldn't play them without being stuck in the ground. Which really goes to show you how they just made a completely new engine for Episode 2, and like everything like that. So maybe lock-on wasn't really possible. Except they had Episode Metal in this game, and that had all of Episode 1's levels. But they had to have the physics engine for Episode 1 there for you to play them. This section is really annoying. What a perfect establishing character moment. Seriously. Again, space out your button presses, because if you just mash the A button too much, then Tails is going to tire out. You gotta be really mindful of the fire shooters. The problem is that you don't know exactly where the fire is going to appear, like the bottom of it that's going to knock you down. So you have to be careful. You have to fly more down than you'd expect to have to, just to be careful. But if you fly too down, then you won't be able to get high enough to get up here. So you just run into the wall. How was I supposed to know that platform was going to fall when I landed on it? And how was I supposed to know that was going to send me up into a crusher block and crush me? But yeah, this is in general a pretty fun level. At one point, Amy Rose was considered for a playable character in the cancelled Sonic game Sonic X-treme. They would recolor Sonic Sprite pink for her, except for the spin dash, spin slash, spin jump, and running sprites, implying that Amy wouldn't have had those abilities. The music and sound effects used in the boss engine for Sonic X-treme came from the Japanese soundtrack of Sonic CD. When they were told to port Sonic X-treme to the Saturn, they had problems, like the game running at 3 frames per second with only 4 colors and it crashes. Point of View Studios was hired to continue it, porting an older version of the game to the Saturn, but they had the same problems as Sen and Eton did. Alon was taken off the project because management viewed him as someone who didn't follow company politics and barely directed the other programs. After Point of View made a demo of the game and Alon and Sen saw it, they left to make X-treme for the PC. Point of View made their own engine with a completely different source code. So as you can see, it was already becoming a mess. By the way, I'm really lucky that I happened to be using the rolling combo at that point, because otherwise I wouldn't have broken through that wall. This is a really annoying boss fight. Easily the worst boss fight in the game. It drags out for a ridiculous extent, and all of the problems with Skyfortress Act 1 are present here. Again, you can't go past the right side of the screen. You can't make it scroll faster. So it's not like you could just spam pressing the X button. And if you press the X button, then Tails will just get dizzy and stop, and then he'll go straight back to the left side of the screen. So if you use a tornado boost here, you're pretty much guaranteed to get hit by the lasers and get cheated out of a hit. You have to dodge the lasers with your gigantic plane, and it's just too precise. Like, you move extremely slowly on tornado, forwards and backwards. So it's not really fair that they expect you to dodge the lasers in the first place. And it's entirely random. There's no concrete strategy for where the lasers will appear, and sometimes the lasers will actually appear from the bottom of the screen instead of the top. This is another boss fight that made me start to resent the Metal Sonic theme because of how annoying this boss fight was. It got to the point where I literally searched for a Hypersonic mod just so that I could play it as Supersonic without getting all the emeralds. But guess what? Turns out that mod doesn't actually do anything if you don't have any emeralds. It makes you look like Supersonic, but you can't actually be invincible until you get 50 rings. And even once you get 50 rings, if you don't have all the emeralds at that point, then the mod is essentially useless. It just turns you gold and that's it. What was the point of that? The most annoying thing is that even though I could have sworn I backed up my BIOS, that mod basically replaced my Sonic model with a gold one. So for quite a long time in this LP, I'm going to have that gold model. It's not going to be until I start using the classic Sonic and Tails mod that I'm going to make it so that I'm actually going to... Yeah, right here you're seeing an infinite loading screen because I deleted too many files or something. But yeah, it really goes to show you how frustrating this boss is. I don't understand why it has to operate on Sonic Advance 2 physics. Why can't it just operate under normal physics so it actually controls well? Thankfully, you can't fall off the plane unless you're in co-op mode, because then the second player controls Tails, meaning the tornado. And so, if you air dash and the player doesn't catch you, then you'll die. So, needless to say, these airplane sections are really annoying co-op, much like this boss fight. And of course, if you fall into the airship, you'll die. And see? I have a golden model, but I'm not invincible. I can still get attacked. So, what is the point of making a Supersonic mod that doesn't make you invincible? What is the point of that? Why are these flying badniks even here? They pretty much force you to jump, but jumping can send you into lasers. Like if you collect 50 rings and have all the emeralds, you can turn into Hypersonic. But what's the difference between Hypersonic and Supersonic? Other than a model change, which no one really cares about. Like, if you can't do all the things that Hypersonic did in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, then what's the point? And I'd rather just start out as actual Supersonic and upgrade. But instead, I have my model replaced with this for no reason. And of course, because it's a boss fight, there are no checkpoints at all. Even though Skyfortress Act 1 had checkpoints, it's just annoying all around. Anyways, representatives of Sega Japan showed up later in Sonic X-Stream's development, and they were disappointed by the progress on the main game engine because Point of View ended up showing them a broken effort to port an older version of the engine. But we're so impressed by the game's boss engine that, get this, they asked for the entire game to be made on the boss engine. By now the team is running short on men, and as Point of View hadn't gotten much further in their initial demo, it all had fallen on the Extreme team to finish the game before Christmas. The game would have had to compete with Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot. A major change in the project was replacing the pre-rendered Sonic sprite with a 3D model. Christina Coffin, who had been working non-stop to get the game done, came down with pneumonia, and since she was leading the technology and creating the engine, they couldn't complete the project without her. So because they couldn't release the game on Christmas to compete with Mario 64, they decided to give up and it was cancelled. Sonic Extreme was originally based on the Saturday morning cartoon while it was still called Sonic Mars. It was going to include the Freedom Fighters. But when the project developed more, all those elements ended up being dropped. There were some alternate storylines for it, like Sonic was going to be on a date with Tiara, but Eggman crashes it, and Sonic and Eggman contract a Doom virus and work together to find a cure. And Eggman tries getting several magical rings of order, and there's a good professor and Tiara. There are all sorts of different stories considered for it. It took me forever just to get to this part of the boss fight, and you know it's really annoying when you miss with the homing attack, because even though the targeting reticle clearly showed up, you just air dash instead, because I was too high up. And at one point, I intentionally got myself, well, not intentionally, but this section of the boss fight drags out for far too long, to the point where I was wondering if I wasn't supposed to be dodging them. I wondered if I was supposed to be like tornado boosting into them to knock them back of the airship, and that would let me progress the boss. And that's why I end up getting crushed by these things after you do the whole entire boss all over again. It is a good thing that there's these preemptive white horizontal lines that show up to warn you when lasers are going to appear, because it would be really cheap if they immediately appeared and there's no way of knowing they're going to show up in time. This was almost a stopping point for me, and I almost gave up on the game because of it. I have 0 lives left because I got so many game overs and lost so many lives to this one boss alone. At the very end of the boss fight, you absolutely need to use a tornado boost against the boss, which makes you wonder why you weren't allowed to do that every other time, because if you could just tornado boost into him, then it would make it a lot more easy, rather than forcing you to use a homing attack against him, when doing that would just make you air dash and fall to your death. Okay, if Metal Sonic can just fly here on his own, then why did he bother with Tails' rocket in episode Metal? Like, was it just because he thought it would look cool? Was he trying to save energy? Whatever.